Breaking. The emergency call intercepted. Tonight, we begin with an intercepted communication that Western intelligence agencies had long anticipated, Kremlin insiders had desperately feared, and Ukrainian military planners had spent months orchestrating with surgical precision. A communication that unfolded not over days of careful deliberation, but in a single panicked phone call in the early hours of the morning. A phone call that revealed catastrophic failures at the highest levels of Russian military command. A phone call that exposed the true state of Russia's war machine in ways Moscow can no longer hide. A phone call that forced Sergei Shoigu, the man once considered untouchable in Vladimir Putin's inner circle, to deliver news that no Russian leader ever wants to hear. What Ukraine did today crossed a threshold that Russian military doctrine had deemed impossible to breach. And when that threshold was crossed, the response from the Kremlin was not the confident dismissal we have come to expect. They responded with confusion, with blame, and with the kind of internal finger pointing that reveals a system beginning to fracture under pressure. For weeks, there had been intelligence chatter, not from official Ukrainian government sources, not from NATO press briefings, just chatter that Kyiv was preparing something unprecedented against Russia's military backbone. Ukraine has been aggressive in its deep strike operations, yes. But it has also been methodical. Their targeting followed a logic, almost a strategic doctrine, that Western analysts had learned to recognize: oil refineries, ammunition depots, air defense installations, command posts. Targets designed to degrade Russian capability without triggering a response that could fundamentally change the nature of the conflict. But this week, that pattern suddenly, and completely, changed. Ukraine goes quiet, the warning signs. Intelligence analysts who monitor Ukrainian military preparations know the indicators. The sudden repositioning of long-range strike assets to forward staging areas. The unusual concentration of special operations forces near specific infiltration corridors. A sharp rise in encrypted communications between the Ukrainian general staff and frontline commanders. Then, silence. Complete operational silence from units that had been actively engaged just days before. And whenever Ukraine goes quiet on that scale, it means something massive is about to unfold. The silence lasted 72 hours. Then came the strikes. And then came the phone call. Early this morning, signals intelligence units operating in coordination with allied agencies detected what they described as an emergency encrypted communication between the Russian Security Council and the Kremlin. The authentication protocols used had not been activated since the earliest and most chaotic days of the 2022 invasion. These are channels reserved for catastrophe. For failures so severe they cannot be concealed. For strategic setbacks that threaten the entire war effort. Or for situations so dire that only Vladimir Putin himself can authorize the response. Western observers did not immediately know which category this event fell into, or whether it fell into all three simultaneously. But they knew one thing with certainty. Something had gone fundamentally wrong for Russia. And when things go fundamentally wrong for Russia's military leadership, the entire world pays attention. The response from Russian military channels was not coordinated propaganda. It was not routine denial. It was not carefully crafted messaging designed to minimize damage. It was chaos. Military blogger after military blogger described the reaction as confusion over how Ukraine had achieved such comprehensive targeting, alarm at the scale of destruction across multiple strategic facilities, and, perhaps most significantly, complete unpreparedness to explain how supposedly impenetrable defenses had failed so catastrophically. Chaos only conceals the truth temporarily. Tonight, the truth is emerging, and it is devastating for the Kremlin. What Ukraine destroyed. Within a 24-hour period, Ukrainian forces conducted what analysts are calling the most comprehensive strike operation of the war. These were not symbolic attacks. They were precision strikes against the nervous system of Russia's war machine. Ukraine targeted a weapons manufacturing complex recently expanded for a major production increase personally ordered by Putin, struck before production could begin. The primary assembly facility for precision-guided munitions. A logistics hub distributing ammunition across the entire front line. A command coordination center synchronizing operations across multiple sectors. A fuel storage depot supplying aviation units conducting glide bomb attacks. A maintenance facility keeping Russia's remaining aircraft operational. In other words, Ukraine targeted the circulatory system of Russia's military. The production, the logistics, the coordination, the fuel, the sustainment. This is why Shoigu's emergency call mattered. This was not a tactical setback. This was not a localized failure. This was a strategic catastrophe, one that strikes at Russia's ability to sustain the war itself. And Shoigu, once the most powerful defense official in Russia, now sidelined to the Security Council after repeated failures, was the man forced to deliver that news. Kremlin response: blame without answers. Faced with disaster, the Kremlin did what it always does. It searched for someone to blame. And tonight, that blame is falling everywhere, except where it belongs. Intelligence analysts believe Ukraine's operation was designed not only to destroy infrastructure, but to expose dysfunction at the heart of Putin's command structure. Ukraine wanted to see whether Russian air defenses could protect assets declared impenetrable, whether command structures could coordinate under pressure, whether leadership would accept responsibility or collapse into internal conflict. The results exceeded Ukrainian expectations. Air defenses failed across every targeted site. Command structures showed no coordinated response for hours. Leadership immediately descended into blame and recrimination. Western defense officials describe the operation as systemic stress testing, deliberately revealing weaknesses Russia has long hidden from its own population. Ukraine demonstrated that it understands Russian dysfunction as well as Russian geography. This was comprehensive warfare, and Russia has been unable to counter it since the invasion began. For every defense Russia deploys, Ukraine adapts. For every safeguard Russia claims, Ukraine penetrates. Why this moment is so dangerous for Putin? This catastrophe arrives as Putin faces mounting pressure from all directions. Military hardliners demand accountability. Industrial leaders demand explanations. Regional governors demand resources. Intelligence officials demand scapegoats. Shoigu is fighting for political survival. Putin is balancing all of this while facing a Ukrainian military that has just proven it can strike anywhere, at any time. And leaders under that kind of pressure often make desperate decisions. The Kremlin's official statement calls the attacks terrorism against civilian infrastructure. That language is deliberate. It is propaganda code for we cannot admit what was actually destroyed. Soldiers will notice missing weapons. Commanders will notice unavailable systems. Factories will fail to deliver. And when that realization spreads, no amount of propaganda will contain the consequences. Ukraine's message to the world. President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the nation and the world. Greater than, we told Russia that nothing they have is beyond our reach. Tonight, we proved it. Greater than, every factory that produces weapons to kill our people is a legitimate target. Greater than, Shoigu can call Putin as many times as he wants. It will not change what is coming. These were not rhetorical flourishes. They were statements from a commander-in-chief who has just authorized the most comprehensive strike of the war. Ukraine knows retaliation is coming. But Ukraine also knows it has changed the strategic equation. What happens next? Western analysts are now considering three major implications. Ukraine will push for additional long-range strike systems. Ukraine will expand similar operations deeper into Russia. Ukraine will systematically degrade Russia's military-industrial capacity until sustained warfare becomes impossible. Today, Ukraine proved Russian infrastructure is not protected. Russian air defenses are not effective. Russian leadership is not competent. Russian power is not what Moscow claims. This is a test of systemic resilience. Russia wants to absorb the damage. Ukraine wants to collapse the system. The West wants proof its support is working. Every day without an effective Russian response validates Ukraine's strategy. Moscow is quiet tonight. Too quiet. And when the Kremlin is quiet after humiliation, it means calculations are being made. Because tonight, Russia learned something that fundamentally changes this war. There are no safe rear areas. No protected factories. No untouchable command centers. And that is exactly what winning looks like.